Hello and welcome back to Shadow the Hedgehog without rings. In the first two parts we finished examining the game, and as announced, today we will look into the expert mode. Let's see how many rings we have to collect here. I hope you enjoy it. First, let's answer the question, what's it all about with the expert mode? Well, in this game, counting bosses in as well, there are 71 missions total. You unlock the expert mode by getting the best rank in all of them. Ranks are given dependent on the amount of points you got. In boss fights, it's how much time you needed. In the expert mode itself, you play one stage after another. Mostly you have to get to the goal. But there are a few small changes everywhere, most of them to be more difficult. For our challenge, this means we can just tackle one stage after another. The rest of the rules stay the same. Get as few rings as possible, and don't use glitches unless you really have to avoid rings. One more thing. Because we also had to get the best rank in all of the final bosses, we saw the corresponding endings already and unlocked quite a few special weapons. We can definitely use Heal Cannon, Omo Chao Gun, Satellite Laser and Samurai Blade on level 2 and Egg Vacuum on level 1, and I will do exactly that. Okay then, let's go. The first stage is, of course, Westopolis, and once again it begins with the 5 rings that we have to collect and cannot skip. At the end of the first major area, we have the problem that the zip path that's normally there has been replaced by a light dash. Luckily, up to this point, there's enough that you can defeat to fill up the blue gauge, so it's already time for Chaos Control. And it goes very far actually. The rest of the stage is not a problem without collecting rings. The goal has been moved. It's not right after the 5th save point anymore, but instead at the very end of the stage. So that makes 5 rings so far. In Digital Circuit, you start on the circuits again, where you unfortunately have to collect some rings, but it starts with just 16 this time instead of 24 before. After the first save point, there's a plate that you should use to go up, but these 2 rings weren't there before, so I need a spin dash jump this time. Afterwards, there's a platforming passage that has partly been replaced by a light dash, and until the end I thought I had to collect at least 4 rings, but it turned out that I can use another spin dash jump to the edge of the first platform to skip all of the rings. After the first searchlight, I get an invincibility from the random capsule to at least go through 2 firewalls undamaged. But I can't skip all of the rings, because at one place there are 5 rings that I have to collect at least 4 of. After a short rest, we get to the next circuits. There is a way where you get hit only once and also don't have to collect any rings, up until the point where you have to go through 4 more rings. Then you get hit one more time and have exactly 0 rings for the rest. At the next searchlights, in the original, there's an easy jump passage, but here, at the last searchlight, to avoid 5 more rings, you have to defeat every enemy one by one, and at the end have to jump very far. The goal has been moved again. Unfortunately, like in the Dark mission, this means you have to go through a warp hole and touch the last save point. Then you go to the goal, which is where the core program was before, but the 34 rings we had to collect really do hurt. Glyphic Canyon was the stage where we had to skip multiple save points with strats like spin dashes, just like the very first one already. Then we take advantage of the Heal Cannon. It's so much easier to fill up the red gauge with the black arms. And we need it full if we want to use Chaos Blast and not touch the second save point. Right before the 3rd save point, there's another light dash path added. For us, this just means that the spin dash we have to do anyway is made a bit easier. Then we need to fill up the red gauge again, to skip the 5th save point with another few Chaos Blasts. Then there's a few platforms removed near a light dash. To not take it anyway, we can jump to a later part of the stage. The rest of the level is pretty easy, making this the first stage in expert mode where we don't have to collect any rings. In Little Highway, you start once again by collecting 6 rings that you can't do anything about. Then you have to fill up the blue gauge pretty quick, because right before the 3rd save point you originally had a rocket to get there. Here the way was made a bit harder, and you can't avoid all of the rings at the poles, even if the light dash directly afterwards is pretty easy to skip. So you have to fill up the blue gauge exactly here, to do a spin dash off of the cage and use Chaos Control. However, this one is not that easy. It's very precise. If you press one moment too soon, you collect one ring of the light dash anyway. If you press too late, you die. While continuing the way forward, I fill up the blue gauge again, because the other rocket doesn't take me as high as it usually does. So I use another Chaos Control. Indeed, you can avoid all of the rings at the poles this time, and you also can jump in between the other rings, but it's just easier that way. So this stage is possible with 6 collected rings. Cryptic Castle. After the first save point, the balloon that's supposed to take you up has been replaced by a ball that also only appears if you collect one certain ring, and it was not possible for me to avoid that. But suddenly, a few months later, the Shadow speedrunning community discovered a new trick, a spin dash jump at the vent. Of course, I immediately perked up, and yes, it actually worked. That's how I could avoid this ring. Green stands where the lower black hawk once was. The way leads to the upper one, so I get thrown off at a higher place. You can either jump in between the rings on the rails, or what I recommend, go back to the lower path. The next balloon has been replaced as well, by platforms followed by a light dash. I used Chaos Control first, because I didn't know that you could just use a spin dash jump from the last platform to the other side. On the last rail, you have to jump in between rings as well, but then you can finish Cryptic Castle without collecting any rings. Prison Island was a rather easy stage without rings, and in expert mode it hasn't become much harder, but there are still 2 important places. First, somewhere in between the 3rd and 4th save point, there's just another light dash added. I first thought we need Chaos Control, but to my surprise, a simple spin dash jump can barely be enough as well. Then there's a new jump plate. You have to position yourself carefully if you don't want to accidentally land on the 4th save point. The goal is at the very end, near the last top secret disc, so no rings necessary here as well. Circus Park is next. The first part of the stage is pretty much like the normal mission, but at some point after the 5th save point, there was a rocket that brought us to the other side. It has been replaced by an already hard platforming section. You remember, we can't go through the fire rings, because they give us 5 rings. You can eventually make it to the other side, but it's very hard. In the tent, you also have to watch out. On the last rope, there's a fire ring in an inconvenient place, and it can only be skipped by a very hard spin dash jump. I recommend Chaos Control for at least one of these 2 places. In this level, you don't have to collect rings. In Central City, for the first time, you don't have to go to a goal. Instead, you have to destroy the 5 bombs. At the first one, a new light dash path appears. It doesn't matter if you skip it by using a spin dash jump or go left to the lower path that's supposed to be blocked off. The second bomb isn't where it was anyway, and at the next bomb the ways go back together. Interesting enough, at the bomb on the toxic water, that gun robots and black arms guard the same cage. Every place is possible without a problem. At the last bomb that's at a new place instead of the original second bomb, the stage ends. No rings here. That was easy enough, and the doom is not a problem at all. This stage really has almost no changes. I even was able to take the same route. Maria says that you have to heal 10 researchers, but that's just supposed to take you to the wrong path, because they are all where the goal was before. So it's no surprise that this stage can be done without rings. Sky Troops. Like the first time, we start with 22 rings. Then we have to fill up the hero gauge by destroying the cannon multiple times, but this time twice is enough, because we have help by the heal cannon on Eggman's robots. Then there's a place where a zip path has been replaced by a light dash, but we can just spin dash to the other side. And there it is, the light dash, the reason why we need Chaos Control. Shortly afterwards, there's another new light dash, this time instead of a rocket. And again, the spin dash is the tool of our choice. Then we again need a full blue gauge, because later in the level we are nearly enforced to take a light dash, and the spin dash is never enough to get us to the other side. But not enough with that, we also need to cancel Chaos Control, which is possible by using the spin dash button, and shortly afterwards use it again, because we also don't want to land on the save point. But then it's no problem to finish the level without any more rings. However, it's 22 we had to pick up this time. In Mad Matrix, I start with a spin dash jump to already skip the first 4 rings. After leaving the blue tower, you have to go to the other 3 towers, like in the hero mission. I start with the green one. Then I get a heal cannon, which is conveniently placed in my path, and in the yellow tower almost fill up the hero gauge. You may remember that on the way to the red tower, you have to pick up one of these ring groups. The plan isn't quite as the one you saw anymore, but these parts haven't changed. Near the platform in the center, you can use Chaos Control and get to the red tower without rings. Then there's a light dash that you can skip by using another spin dash jump. Like that, it's possible in expert mode as well to finish the stage without collecting rings. Death Ruin starts with you being let out not at the first save point but instead directly at the second one. You still have to press forward if you don't want to land on it. Then you go a slightly different path, but it changes basically nothing. The rest of the way is like before, and possible without rings. Death Ruins is probably the only stage that has become easier in expert mode. Honestly, the 13th stage, the Ark, is a joke. The whole time you fly on the Black Vault, have to evade almost no rings, and just have to make it to the end. The hardest thing in this stage was to not accidentally land on the last save point. That was an easy first try for me. Oh yes, 0 rings. In Air Fleet, at both of the major path splits, the right path is blocked off. The first time that's not too bad. On the left there are a lot of black arms, and we rather fill up the hero gauge anyway, because at the first rail there are a few platforms missing on the left. You can jump in between the rings, but to be honest that's too hard for me over such a long time, so I'm grateful for the Chaos Control. Then, a bit surprising, I get the heal cannon, because after the second path split there are only gun robots on the left. And close to the end there's a place where another few platforms are missing, this time near a light dash. You can use a spin dash jump, but that's very hard as well. And I don't even use Chaos Control, but the invincibility of Hero Shadow to get on the electrified rail. Then you just have to get to the end. All of this was possible without rings. In Iron Jungle as well, the game wants you to take certain paths, like the upper one at the start. But there's a rail with rings on it, so I jump back down halfway to make it a bit easier for myself. Shortly afterwards, the rocket has been replaced by platforms and a light dash path. We can't get to the other side on our own, so I use Chaos Control once again. Before the 4th save point we already know the place where we needed to use a spin dash jump, so let's go to the end. Ah hey, another rocket that has been replaced by a light dash. Chaos Control. We got there because we were supposed to take the lower path at the end. We can also use a few tricks to go to the upper path, but it's no use, because we need Chaos Control anyway. But despite all of this, it's not that hard to complete the stage without rings. In Space Gadget, almost everything works like before. Let's take a look over what we wanna do once again. After the first 18 rings, we defeat 3 Black Hawks and 2 Black Warriors. Then we go to the lowest platform and shoot 3 more Black Hawks from a distance. Then we get the heal cannon and start the incredibly hard backtrack. Fun fact, this thread was the last one that I discovered and built into this challenge. After doing the backtrack, we heal all gun robots we ran past so far. Then we go forward the same path again, defeat 1 last Black Hawk and heal the last gun robot. The goal is to skip these 12 rings, and with our current plan we managed to exactly fill up the blue gauge and use Chaos Control. The dark path is blocked off this time. Normally you can just drop down here, but there's a way you can still get down, and that's what I recommend to do. The dark path is just safer. The hero path is also possible, but there's a place where you have to hope to randomly not collect rings. We end the stage with 18 rings. In Lost Impact, especially the start is interesting. Normally in this stage you move around with the gun lift a few times, but the first one has been replaced by other things, so you have to do the beginning without the gun lift. One jump sequence is critical, containing 15 rings. That's no way for us, but the spin dash jump from the previous platform is super hard, and there are many things that can go wrong. However, once you did this, the rest of the stage is pretty much no problem. Everything works like before, you just need an additional gun lift to get to the goal. Therefore, you don't need to collect any rings here. Gun Fortress. Here, once again, very few changes have been made. There's one relevant one near the first save point, but also not that much. The rest is pretty much like the Dark mission, and we know of that one that it is possible without rings. Everything is easy. Don't know what else I shall say about this. It's no different in Black Comet. There are no changes in this level as well that would force us to collect additional rings in any way. Also, before and now, there are not many rings in this stage anyway, and all of them are easy to avoid. So it's no problem to get to the goal without rings. In Lava Shelter, this time the first 3 defense systems become activated automatically, so we have to fight the lava a lot more. For example, at the rail after the second save point, we are supposed to use a light dash, but there are also platforms nearby that we can take. At the second defense system, we are supposed to take a rail with rings on it. Luckily, a spin dash jump is also enough. Another rail is following, where you have to jump between rings. At the third defense system, we are obviously supposed to take the dark path, activate the fourth defense system, and then go the long way up. But there are 2 more light dashes. I think you know where this is going, to another chaos control. Then the goal is where the last defense system once was. No rings had to be collected here. Cosmic Fall has become much harder, not even in the first outer area. There a platform is missing that we back then took instead of a light dash. Without it we will never get to the other side. The obvious solution is chaos control, but for that we unfortunately have to use a glitch for once. If we shoot opponents in their death animation with the heal cannon, they respawn and we still get the points. It's a pity that Black Hawks don't have a death animation, or at least I didn't manage to do it. Mad Matrix Dark would be possible with 1 less ring, so 13. Much more platforming is necessary, especially towards the end, and it's harder for us because of course we don't want to use the homing attack on a ring container, but without rings it's possible to get to the goal, that is near the computer. In Final Haunt, like in the original, you start landing on a save point and you can't do anything about it. The shield generators have been removed. You have to take the paths of the hero mission now. But it doesn't matter anyway, on none of the ways were rings you had to collect. Just between save points 5 and 6 there's a badly placed light dash. Oh well. Chaos Control! So it's not surprising that the 10 rings from the beginning stayed the only ones when I reached the goal. Finally, the last way. Most of it works like before. You should make your way through the Black Comet and have to use Chaos Control here and there. At one place, normally, there's a light dash that's not that easy to skip, but in expert mode instead, you have to show off your homing attack skills once more. Directly afterwards, there are 2 acceleration rings with 20 rings, but they have been removed now as well. I find it super nice of the game that it makes it so easy for us at the end. We don't have to collect rings, and with this we completed the expert mode. One small remark for completionist's sake, I used at least 1 save state in Digital Circuit, Level Highway, Cryptic Castle, Circus Park, Space Gadget, Lost Impact and Cosmic Fall. We now know how many rings we have to collect everywhere. Adding all of these up gets us to 95. Not even a 3-digit number. But is it really the minimum? I have a physical PlayStation 2 version, or maybe it's just an early version of the game. And in Level Highway I sometimes only collected 1 of the 6 rings. Just like in Space Gadget only 12 of 18 sometimes. So can the minimum be lowered by 11 onto 84? I don't know. For now I will stay at 95, especially because it's a pretty good birth year. With that, this video series comes to an end. I hope you liked it. I want to mention the Shadow speedrunning community here again, without which I wouldn't have the inspiration or the necessary tricks to do this challenge. So thank you very much. I hope you have a nice day and see ya!